Gluckstein Lawyers proudly present Butter Torts, a truly Canadian legal podcast. We're excited to have you join us bi-weekly as we interview guests on a variety of different topics related to personal injury. We look forward to sharing our expertise, insights, and most importantly, our stories with our listeners while providing a better understanding of the personal injury legal landscape. You'll have a chance to meet many members of our amazing team and learn more about the role they play in helping our clients lead better lives.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Butter Torts, a truly Canadian legal podcast. My name is Brenda Agnew, for those of you who do not know me, and I have the pleasure today of being joined by my co-host, Jordan Assaraf. So this will make...
Hi, everybody.
this will make two in a row. We go through stretches where we don't have these together, and then we inundate you with multiple episodes together. And we also have the pleasure of being joined by Kris Bonn today. And so Kris, do you prefer Kris or Christian?
Kris. Yeah.
I feel like your mom's going to call you Christian. Like, I feel like...
Only when I'm in trouble. Only when I'm getting in trouble, but yes.
Right,
Kris is great.
When Brenda gets angry at you, she'll like, Christian.
Don't say that.
So Kris Bonn is joining us today. Kris is the managing partner at Bonn Law. And Kris fights for those who have suffered injuries and loss through the wrongdoing of others, including victims of medical malpractice or medical negligence, automobile collisions, and long-term disability denials. Kris is the current president of the Brain Injuries Association Quinte District and the past president of the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association. Kris has achieved top results for his clients in trials and settlement, and we'll be talking about some of those, I think, today. And Kris is the loving father to Grace and Fraser and his partner, Cassandra. Kris was born and raised in Quinte and loves spending time in this great community. So welcome to our podcast.
I think you're missing something.
What am I missing? Uh-oh.
He's a power lifter, too.
I do dabble in a little powerlifting outside the office, yes.
You don't have a rack set up beside your desk that when you get a bad expert report, you're just going to go in.
I do have a pull-up bar, though, Jordan, so my staff laughs because sometimes I'll take a break, do some pull-ups, but no weights at the office.
That's pretty impressive. So Kris, let's chat. So we were doing a little bit of chatting before, but I was just kind of, as we were waiting for Jordan. So your practice is based out of Belleville. You're in the Quinte area, obviously.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the history of the firm and your history with that area and everything?
Yeah, for sure, Brenda. So first of all, thank you for having me on. This is my first podcast, so I'm interested. I listen to a lot of podcasts, so it's nice to be on this side of it and maybe participating.
Yeah.
So Quinte, I grew up in Trenton. Quinte kind of takes into account Trenton, Belleville, and north to probably Bancroft. We're all part of the Quinte area. And for those who probably know Prince Edward County better than the Bay of Quinte area, for the wine region, we're about 20 minutes north of the Prince Edward County. So it's a great area. We're right on the Bay of Quinte. So there's lots to do. It's outdoors. I like being outdoors. So it's a couple of small towns, relatively small, and I really enjoy it.
Absolutely. So I know, Jordan, when we were chatting a little bit in prep for this, we were talking about sort of the similarities. So your dad started the firm or this firm or a firm.
Yes.
Is that right, Kris?
Yeah. So my dad started our firm in 1972, back in the day when he just graduated law school and hung out a shingle. So I don't know too many lawyers that do that now, but he was fresh out of law school at age 27, came home to Trenton where he grew up and started working. And as was the case back then, he took everything. He did real estate, he did family, he did criminal defense, and some civil litigation. So he started that in 1972, continued as a sole proprietor for many years, heavily involved mostly in criminal defense and also some per diem prosecution for federal drug offenses. Again, you may be familiar, may not be familiar, in Ontario, criminal cases are prosecuted by provincially appointed crown attorneys for federal criminal offenses, the criminal code. However, drug offenses are a different statute, and those are prosecuted by private lawyers. So the government hires private lawyers to prosecute drug offenses. So he was a private drug prosecutor while also being a criminal defense lawyer.
Cool.
And do you guys still do any criminal defense?
We do. So our firm is made up currently of 5 active practicing lawyers, and my dad, who's still a partner, still comes to the office. He's turned 80 in May.
Oh.
So he's still coming to the office a couple times a week, mostly more just client relations and speaking to potentially new clients, kind of assess their case before it moves on to the litigation. So we've got 6 lawyers if you count him, but so we've got 3 practicing personal injury lawyers and then 2 full-time criminal defense lawyers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a cool mix.
Wait, have you dabbled in criminal defense at all?
I did. So my personal legal history is went to U of T Law School, got enamored by Bay Street, being at U of T, went to Faskin's, which is a massive multinational law firm in downtown Toronto. I think they had 400 lawyers when I was practicing there. Articled there, worked there for a year as an associate, realized being the 5th lawyer on a large file, doing affidavits and drafting all weekend wasn't for me. So I came back home to Trenton to work with my dad. And at the time, the opportunity was a local criminal defense lawyer was appointed as a judge. So my dad purchased his book of business, his clients, and I went back and did full-time criminal defense law for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Criminal defense lawyer, which I really enjoyed. It was exciting. I would be called in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. when someone was arrested. I've been to jails to visit with clients, did numerous trials, which I really enjoyed. You would do a trial. Sometimes I'd do 2 trials in one day. And the files were a couple centimeters thick, cross-examine a couple of police officers and make some arguments. So it was very interesting. But as you get older and you get a family, it's a hard practice to continue. It's not the most lucrative practice, so you work hard and if you're doing legal aid, which you do a lot, the pay is not great. That's why I loved it. You got great trial experience, but I transitioned into personal injury law after the first 10 years. My dad had been getting into it. He was a president of Bonn Law as well. It's into our Trial Lawyers Association. So I got transitioned to that and have been doing that the last 12 years.
So, that's incredible. But we will have some listeners who are probably just getting out of law school, looking for some articling jobs. Tell me how the transition from criminal defense to the personal injury world worked, and what skills or strategies did you take from criminal defense over to the PI side?
Yeah. I think they're actually very compatible. Not so much maybe here in Ontario, but I'm also a member of the American Association of Justice, the American Trial Lawyer Group, and you'll notice sometimes there's a lot of firms that in the States that do both criminal defense and personal injury. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good mix because I really see them both on the same type of lawyer, where you're defending the underdog, you're defending the those who are vulnerable against a powerful opposing party, either the government with unlimited resources or a large corporation or insurance company with unlimited resources. So you're really the little guy fighting against David and Goliath type situation. So I think there's a lot of similarities. And I know it's hard because people want to get out and start making money, but the criminal defense is such a great training ground. By the time I started doing personal injury, I had probably done 100 criminal trials in the 10 years. And so I was not uncomfortable being in a courtroom. And now, as I'm sure Jordan's experience is, if you're lucky, you'll get a trial a year in civil. Yep. And the reason is they're expensive and they're very time consuming and they're all encompassing. Like I talk about doing 2 trials a day in criminal. That would be, it would be crazy to think about that in civil because the preparation and the documents and everything, it's just not feasible. So I think it's a great training ground to learn how to cross-examine witnesses, especially professional witnesses, because it's mostly police officers you're cross-examining. And so it helps you when you're cross-examining an expert because the people who've done this before and you know how to deal with a very qualified and canny witness.
So are you one of those lawyers who goes into a civil trial without the rules of evidence because of the criminal background?
Not quite. I definitely get a better feel of the evidence because when you do it enough, you'll learn it a lot more. But And I think that's what happened is once I got into full-time civil practice, I think I went 5 years without a trial. And so you do get a little rusty. So I'm always keeping up to date with the evidence. But that's one thing I did miss was the constant trial work. And being in court, it was fun. It was exciting to go to court every day. And even if you weren't in trial, you'd be speaking with other lawyers, talking to judges.
Yeah.
And I miss that because now, as a civil lawyer, plaintiff lawyer, you spend most of your time in your office, especially the Zoom now. You meet with witnesses over Zoom. You meet with experts by video mostly, and it's only rarely the times you get to go to trial when you're out of the office. Maybe motions now are mostly by Zoom. And so I miss that part about being in person in the court and talking to other lawyers and judges.
Yeah.
But you did just have 2 successful trials. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about those trials?
Yeah,
thank you. And we did. I worked with Paul Hart of Hart Law in 2 very significant medical malpractice cases. And I'm obviously very pleased with the results for our clients, very seriously compromised clients. Those are cases that came to our office because they're local people or they heard from us from local people. And there were 2 medical negligence cases, one involving a 28-year-old woman who had attended the hospital with an asthma attack and wasn't treated, in our theory, wasn't treated promptly or appropriately and suffered catastrophic brain injury where she's now needs full-time care, incapable of living alone, had 3 young kids, a very devastating situation. And so we started the claim and we're successful in that after a 5-week trial. So we're very pleased with that. Of course, the CMPA is appealing. So we're getting ready for the appeal. And then, which almost reminded me of when I was in criminal practice, we rolled right into that. And 3 weeks later was into another trial, this time in Hamilton, on another significant medical negligence case. And again, I teamed up with Paul Hart and we went to Hamilton and I had a 3-week trial that time and got the decision at the end of this year, end of last year to December 2024. And again, was successful. In that case, again, was a very compromised young person. This was a 6-month-old baby actually at the time. And somewhat complicated. She had a seizure disorder. We alleged they didn't treat it appropriately and suffered a seizure, significant brain damage. And again, this sad case, as many of the cases are, she's nonverbal. She's now 21. She's nonverbal, needs full-time care. And so hopefully these decisions, these judgments get upheld and we'll get the funds for these clients to live with more dignity and some more freedom.
Yeah.
That's great advocacy work. Well done and congrats. And let's hope they hold up at the Court of Appeal. But you did mention, what was it, 3 weeks apart?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, tell us a little bit about some of the prep that you did.
That's crazy.
In order to go from a 5-week trial 3 weeks later into another. And how long was this one?
Yeah.
This was it was a 3-week trial. It was a bit more condensed. It was very complicated from the medical perspective, and I'll give some credit to the CMPA. I find that the lawyers, although at least ones I've done, these are my only 2 trials I've done. I know there's been some other stories of other lawyers being more difficult. The lawyers are very cooperative, so we agreed on a lot of facts, which made it a lot easier. We didn't have a lot of fight about the evidence, and I learned a lot from Paul Hart. When we got these cases, they've been in our office for a long time. I think we were originally retained in these cases in 2014.
Wow.
So like 9 years. And so I had just started medical negligence cases back then. I certainly didn't feel qualified to take on these significant cases. That's why I asked Paul to help me.
Right.
And these were my first medical negligence cases, and he helped a lot, obviously learning the system. I've done some other civil cases and obviously a lot of criminal cases, but medical negligence is a whole new ballgame. So it was very, very instructive and a learning experience. And so what we did is we met the summer before. So the first trial started January 2024. Again, I don't think I'd do a trial again starting the first Monday after the Christmas holidays. So I was working all through the holidays, which my family didn't like.
No.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
But we had met in June the year before and had like a 2-day session where we mapped everything out. And thankfully, I have a great team here at the office. And so they did a lot of the prep work. We had things printed ahead of time. And they had different clerks working on both files so that while we're in one trial, they're doing at least all the prep with the paper, the printing and everything, getting ready. And so, yeah, it's just really being prepared ahead of time.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. So obviously with your dad, you grew up with him as a lawyer and him in this field. Is it something that you had always wanted to do? Was it something that he had to talk you into? Did you feel like you needed to follow his footsteps? Like, how did you decide, this is the route that I want to go. I want to do this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you asked him, I think he'd have a similar answer. He never pushed law. So it wasn't a thing where I was expected to be a lawyer. And frankly, I never planned to be a lawyer growing up. I was into business. I went to Queen's Commerce.
Okay.
And so I always planned to be a business person. Didn't know what area, but that's what I wanted to do. Did accounting for a summer in between third and fourth year at PricewaterhouseCoopers as an accounting. Yeah, exactly. Enough red pencils and books. So I said, enough of that. And so I wasn't going to go into accounting. I thought about going into consulting, business consulting as an option. So I thought about that. And then I really forget what brought me to it. I think a part of it was, and we can talk about this later, I'm very competitive and played a lot of sports growing up. I continue to compete and play sports. And I like the idea in law that it is a competition in some sense. And you're helping somebody, you're on a team.
Yeah.
And so I thought about that, and I didn't really like some of the atmosphere in the corporations that I was interviewing at, and didn't feel like it would have made me feel like I was doing work for the common person. Essentially, right. You're helping rich companies get richer, save money, and so I decided to look at something else, and that's why I decided to go to law school.
Wow, that's it. I'm surprised that accounting wasn't, the exciting field. Well, what's interesting as you were talking. So my dad is a retired police officer in Toronto. He retired as a staff sergeant, and I had always wanted to be a lawyer. It's amazing I ended up working for lawyers because now I don't want to be a lawyer. But I'd always wanted to be a lawyer, and my police officer father was mortified. I couldn't have picked a worse thing to have talked about doing. And I mean, it's a fairly noble profession. And he was like, absolutely not. That is not what you want to do. These are not the people that you want to be, because, again, he's on that opposing side. He's trying to lock up those criminals, and the defense lawyers are trying to, find justice for their clients. And so, I kind of grew up with lawyers being the low of the low. And, it was disappointing because it is something I'd always wanted to do. And he just was here, he was hearing nothing. I
don't know if that's more. I'm not sure. Where did you grow up, Brenda?
So I grew up in Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a big city thing, but I can tell you when I did criminal law, I was good friends with most of the police officers.
Yeah.
As a criminal defense lawyer, so was my dad. Because when he did criminal defense, and it was a small town. Maybe we see them around all the time.
Yeah.
And I was always respectful when cross-examining a police officer. They knew I had a job to do, and we would frequently talk afterwards. And they said, "Oh, you got me there," and it was like no hard feelings. It really wasn't. And
I never just want to get away from any speeding tickets. Is that why you were nice to them?
Funny you say that, Jordan. There have been a couple of occasions where that happened. Where I have the police officer stops me and says, "Oh, Kris, just slow down." And even a funnier story. My wife, we got married. When we're living in Toronto, and so it was back when I was still working at Faskin's, and I dragged her back to my hometown. Took her a while to find her place because she grew up in Ottawa and we met in Toronto, so she wasn't used to a small town. Yeah. Anyways, funny story is while I was doing criminal defense law, she was stopped for allegedly running a red light. Right. And she's like, it was yellow. It was yellow. It wasn't red.
That's me. That's right.
And so he asked for her license, got her license, saw the name, and actually said to her, "Oh, you're married to Kris Bonn?" "Yes." "Well, he'll probably just fight it anyway, so don't worry about it."
I don't want to show up.
And you're right. I mean, that small town, it's probably right. Because it's like, one day you're probably defending your neighbor. And then, the cop on the stand is someone that you went to high school with. And it probably is more of that type of, and it also could have been, for my dad, like he was really involved for a long time in undercover drug squad. He was involved with biker gangs. Like, he was kind of in a different sort of, I think, different type of policing. And yeah, so I mean, I think it is a lot of it probably that small town versus that big city, for sure, because you got to go see that guy again,
And that's one thing I've heard from, as I said, the two criminal defense lawyers who are working for me now, and we come from a family of lawyers. My cousin used to work for us here at the office, John Bonn, who's now a judge locally in Belleville. He's a criminal judge here in Belleville. And he told me that it's not as collegial as it used to be.
Okay.
There's more out-of-town lawyers coming in, and there's not the same good-naturedness between the crowns and the police and the defense lawyers. So it's even losing it here in Belleville.
Yeah.
I always say there's good and there's bad to that, because, it is great to have those relationships. Obviously help out the cases and the collegiality in the courtroom. It runs smoothly. But then you've got your clients in the background that are like, why are you so chummy with the lawyer or the prosecutor? And it's like, okay, we've got to get you to understand part of what we do is advocacy, but also working with them to come to some resolution or understand who they are and know where we can beat them.
I get that. And actually, I find that's more in the civil practice as well.
Yeah.
Is that even if you have a good relationship with the defense lawyer on the other side, you got to be careful how friendly you are in front of your client.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want to be genuine, but you don't want to give the impression to the client that you're not taking the case seriously and you're not advocating to the best of your ability for your client and being too friendly. So always respectful. Yeah. But I think you're right. It's and in front of a jury as well. Yeah. I don't think it does your case any benefit to be overly friendly with the defense counsel in front of a jury.
Yeah. It's a good point too, Jordan, because like when we went through our case, I mean, our lawyer at the time, Joe, right, he was, he had come from the defense, so he was close with a lot of people from the defense. And I remember wanting to go in like full on elbows up, right? Like I'm a goalie mom. I was like, we're going into this, like we're taking no prisoners in this situation. And, I'm watching them, they have a good relationship and they're working through things. And it was only after the case resolved that I realized how important that relationship was, because it did get us to that point, because there was mutual respect and there was, collaborative conversations. But as a client, not knowing that, I was like, no, I don't think I like this. Like, you two should not like each other. And it took a little bit to understand that was part of the process, was these respectful relationships, right?
For sure. And that helps. That overall helps the case for your client. Because as I was just talking about when I did those two trials recently where hard fought cases on both sides, but respectful. And we didn't fight over things that didn't need to be fought about, which made the trials go more smoothly and more quickly without giving up anything about your case to the other side.
Yeah.
I agree with that way.
I also love to, just even you talking about, I really like Paul a lot. I think Paul's a great lawyer. I've heard a lot of great things about Paul from our lawyers and from other people, but I also really like, the more I'm involved with this industry and the more that I get to meet people like yourselves, it's actually, really great to hear about these relationships that lawyers, have with other lawyers to co-counsel and to, we're all in this for the right reasons. There's enough business for everybody, says the marketing director. There's enough business for everybody, but really, like at the end of the day, we are here to help clients who have been harmed. And if there's an opportunity to work collaboratively with another lawyer in this field to get a positive resolution for a client, I think that's an amazing thing. And, I've been really surprised pleasantly, but I've been really intrigued by those relationships that, it is competitive, but it's not competitive because at the end of the day, you are able to work with other people who have a different level of experience to try to, help these clients.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one really big benefit of the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association, where we're all theoretically competing for the same group of clients, but we work together, we share our cases, our knowledge, our precedents. And so it becomes almost like a 1,200 lawyer law firm across Ontario, which helps you fight against the big corporations who have unlimited resources. So I agree. And I don't know of any Oatland member. I'm sure there's some, but I don't know of any who wouldn't drop the hat drop everything to speak to you if you needed help. And that's one of the benefits of Oatland. So I think it's great that our bar is so willing to cooperate with each other. And yes, I think more lawyers should look for more experienced lawyers in that area so that they ensure that their clients get the proper representation. Because I can tell you, as only a lawyer who had done 2 years of civil litigation, even though I was experienced in the trial room, I had no idea what I was doing in a medical malpractice case.
Right.
And so partnering up with Paul on these cases was the best thing for our clients. Otherwise, I would have been in there, and I don't know for sure, but probably the case would have been dismissed if I tried to do it on my own that early.
Right.
Because I wouldn't have had the ability to retain the right experts or know what question to ask on discovery. So I think it's certainly something that more lawyers should do, because there's enough to go around. As he said, these are big cases. The fee's going to be shared, but you know what? I don't need the full fee, because half of what we're going to get is a lot more than zero if you lost the case.
Yep.
Well, and especially in a situation where you're coming again from from a smaller community where, people, the name is really important, the reputation is important, people know of, there's a comfort level. And for clients who are engaging in this type of lawsuit, it can be daunting, it can be scary, it can be emotional. So knowing that they can work with a local firm who they trust and respect, but then they can also have this other level of expertise, I think is just so great for the client.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So your dad must know Bernie then.
Yes, they come from the same time frame. Yes, he does know him quite well.
Because when you're talking about how he comes in and he meets with clients and I'm thinking, yep, that's our Bernie. He's in there shaking hands and kissing babies and making sure that things are moving along and staying completely active in what's happening. And it must be hard to leave it behind, right?
Yeah, he says he'll never retire, and I don't think he will. And I think it keeps him young. If he just stopped coming in, I don't think he would for sure decline.
Yeah. So how have you seen things change, Kris? I guess even we have these conversations a lot with Charles, right? So Bernie started the firm, Charles came in and he just brought a different level of, diversification and technology and just, did some of those things to help move the firm forward or to help to, stay relevant, if you will, whatever that was, just different than, the way that his dad had when he ran it. And have you sort of seen the same thing, you coming in? Certainly there had to be things that you needed to take a look at or adopt or, change a little bit.
For sure. I think one of the biggest changes in my dad may not see the benefit of it, but it's certainly something we had to do is get into more systems where we have almost standard operating procedure in the file so that people know when to follow steps. And we actually have case management software that once one step is done, say statement of claim is filed, you check off that milestone and then the next tasks pop up on the clerks on what to do automatically, so they don't have to keep getting direction from the lawyer with what to do next.
Right.
Because sometimes, as I'm sure you'll know, is clerks come and go, unfortunately. I mean, we're very lucky at Bonn Law. We've had some of the clerks work with us 10, 15. In fact, we had one clerk retire who worked with us for 50 years last year.
Whoa. Wow.
When he first started in 1972, she just retired.
Whoa.
Wow.
So
I want to know what her gift was after. You can tell me offline.
So we have great employees, but sometimes we do have, or we expand. When we expand, my dad was always a sole proprietor, but as I said, now we've got 5 lawyers, so we have new people coming in. And it's hard when you've got a larger firm, not that we're large, but you go from managing 30 files where the lawyer can be hands-on in every file to 130 files, and you can't make micro decisions and everything. So you've got to set up procedures, systems, so that everyone knows is on the same page. And so that's one of the biggest things, is to set up those type of automatic type procedures so every file gets the same treatment, so they get the top service. And it's hard to do that once you're beyond a certain level.
Yeah, you can't have all the sticky notes everywhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it is easier with the technology, but before, when it was all paper,
oh yeah,
sure, it's just a bunch of checklists everywhere running around. Go to this section, check that off. Okay, who checked that off? Are you sure it's done?
Yeah, that's another was the technology as well.
Yeah,
it's moving in, as I'm sure almost all the law firms now need to have, is we're 100% paperless, so everything's online. Everything gets scanned. We've just started this year or end of last year into AI. So we've got an AI program that we use. And so a lot of that is a whole new development that he never saw coming, obviously. And so that's been very helpful.
I have to say that we never saw it coming. Like Charles has been talking about AI for, 20 years now.
No, self-driving cars for 20
Self-driving
years.
cars. And all,
I swear by now, none of us were driving.
But I have to say, like, even the last few years where AI, I was like, what's this ChatGPT? Like Microsoft Copilot? I don't think so. And now it's like and he, and I don't want to tell him to give him the satisfaction of, he was right. But, AI has been such a big part of it, right? And, now I'm kind of like, what would we do without it? Because I go to it 25 times a day to assist with things.
I was actually just on a call with an expert, and it's like whenever they're saying something you're just unsure, I'm like, okay, ChatGPT, help me a little bit here. And then just get confirmation on it, because you're not really trusting ChatGPT, but at least it's helping you understand some of the concepts that, and the prompting of continuously being able to ask it questions.
Yeah.
And then developing the answer as it goes. It's like you just can't do that when you're typing into Google.
Right.
No.
Not so good. What is interesting, though, is I was speaking with a potential client yesterday. I've been sort of trying to help a parent navigate this legal journey, and she was saying how much she uses it even after they've been to a few lawyers, and they haven't been successful in finding someone to take their case. But every time she would get an expert report, she would run it through ChatGPT, or she would run it through. And so I kind of said, okay, well, a little bit of caution on that, but why she uses it is legal terminology and medical terminology. So when she's putting something through, she feels like she's better prepared to have a conversation about things, because it breaks. So she can say, put this in common language. So because there's so much terminology, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be a big advancement in the legal profession, is the use of AI as it gets more common in for that type of job. And I find that I don't think it's going to replace, obviously, lawyers, but it may replace some of the record summary that it gets done, like medical record summary, creating timelines. Like we've got a legal specific AI program that we just started with. So you put your files into it. It's obviously a closed system, so there's no client confidentiality issues. It's a closed system, but then it analyzes all the records, and you can ask it questions about the file, and it will give you the answers and provide a timeline and summaries of the medical records. So it's going to be a game changer that way.
Yeah, for sure.
People are going to start trusting ChatGPT law over Bonn Law or Gluckstein Law.
I mean, so I want to go back for 1 second, Kris, because you talked about, your love for sports, your competitiveness, and Jordan talked about the powerlifting. So I want to talk about the fact that I just started working out not long ago. And I'm pretty proud.
Free climbing. Yesterday, Brenda's like, oh, I free climb too. I'm like, personal injury firm, you just go free climbing?
Not free climbing. I was doing boulders. Anyways, my point is, I digress. But, that has to be something. So the one thing that I've really realized in working with lawyers is like that competitive streak. Like you can't sometimes you can have a conversation without, tons of questions or kind of the one up, and not because it's always ego driven. It's just the natural tendency to kind of do that. And so, your drive for sports and competitiveness and the things that you do, like that must play a little bit of a role in, sort of, what you do as a lawyer.
Oh, I think for sure it does. I think that, as I said, that was one of my reasons for going into law, is because there is a competitive nature to the business, right? You get a winner and a loser if you go to trial, and that's like any kind of game. But it's a game with significant impact on your client. So again, that's what I also liked about it, is that you are invested, and the result can change lives, and that is what makes it so rewarding. That yes, you can enjoy what you do, but at the end of the day, if you're successful, you're actually helping people, real people, significantly. And so that's such a great feeling to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about sort of some of the changes that you saw, that you had to implement when you came into the practice, just to sort of bring things up to speed and make things a little bit more efficient. But in general, like what are some of the things that you see, Kris, even from a personal injury law landscape? Like, are you seeing things change in this sphere? Are you seeing things sort of coming, down the pipe that are, making it a little bit different than the law that, you've been practicing up until now in personal injury?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, asked me 15 years ago, I was just getting into civil litigation. I sort of think about medical negligence, but I really didn't take a hard look at medical negligence. We always got cases because there's not many options here in Belleville for personal injury lawyers. We got calls, but I didn't get into too much medical negligence. But when we started getting motor vehicle cases, are obviously getting more difficult, and I think that's unfair. I think it's there's no justifiable reason why someone who's injured in a car crash has to lose $50,000 of their damages because the government wants to save the insurance company's money.
Right.
And that's going to get worse. We know that there's accident benefits are getting cut again next year, where they can be optional now. Like everything that you think you have now that you're buying for is going to be optional, and almost no one's going to buy it because they're going to save the $200 a year in insurance. And no one thinks what's going to happen in the future. Oh, it won't happen to me until it does. So I think we're going to a part where there's going to be a lot of people who are injured in car collisions who aren't going to be able to be fairly compensated. I find it terrible now that I have to tell a retiree who suffered an injury from rear-end collisions, they're absolutely innocent. They've got now lived the last 10 years of their life in pain every day, and I have to be upfront with them and say, it's probably not worth suing because you go through 2 years, at best 2 years, more likely 5 to 6 years of stress, litigation, and for what? $10,000 maybe at the end of the day if you're lucky.
Right.
And it's just not fair.
Right.
So I think we're getting into a situation where there's going to be a lot of people who are injured in car crashes who will get zero compensation, which is unfortunate for a lot of people in Ontario. And it also for lawyers, you've got to pivot and transition, right? Because you can no longer count on those cases as part of your business.
Right. That diversification. I mean, I've seen us go through it, at our firm, and bring in different areas of practice. And I mean, obviously, even Jordan working with class action and mass tort stuff now, but starting to see some of the shifts in some of those areas of law that we're practicing in.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, not only from I believe strongly in the rule of law and criminal defense work. So we always want that to be part of our law firm, but also from a business perspective. I mean, that work's never going to go away.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a need for a criminal defense lawyer. So having that as part of our office services helps when we lose part of the civil litigation.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. We're not going to get into criminal defense law, are we?
No, I'm not.
not
today, at least. Maybe when the actual self-driving cars when they're flying.
Not at our firm.
I have a wild question.
Yes, go.
I want to know. So you're talking about coming from a small town. I want to know the most memorable small town case that you would have that you wouldn't really necessarily see in Toronto or Ottawa or the bigger cities, but something that's just like,
that's a good one.
This was a weird case, but something that you actually took on in the end.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to think. I mean, I got a couple, I don't know how weird they are. I mean, I've had 2 cases where people have been injured by hitting a cow driving.
Okay. So now we're talking.
Right. So I've had cases where I had to look into some pretty obscure legislation about, I forget the act, but
cattle law.
No, there's acts about when cows escape from the farm and the vehicle hits them. So I've had those types of cases. I had 2 cases where people got injured by hitting a cow on the road.
Is it the Cow Act or the act of the cow?
And again, when I did my criminal defense days, it's I don't know if you have to edit this part out, but unfortunately we have a well-known history, not very enviable about our area, north of Highway 7 it's called, where people sometimes get in relations with their close family members.
Oh, okay.
And so I've had cases as a criminal defense lawyer, you're defending crimes of incest or sexual assault involving family members. And sometimes it's on consent, but it's still a crime. So those have been some interesting smaller town cases. And one case that, I don't know if it's small town or not, but I was involved in, which almost got me on 60 Minutes. Yes. I'll tell you, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, I think we're going back 15 years now, Colonel Russell from CFP
Yes,
Trenton.
I remember. My son was at camp out near that area at that time, and we had to go through a check for our tires. Yes.
Do you remember Colonel Russell, Jordan?
No, I was about to Google it.
Okay, so so he was the commander-in-chief of our local air base, because Trenton's got the largest air base in Canada.
Yeah.
So it's a very prestigious position. And there started to be some pretty terrifying acts in our area where women were being tied up and forced into their underwear for a while.
Yeah.
And it got worse. And then eventually a young woman was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the suspicion led to Colonel Russell. And you talked about the tire treads. The big evidence was the tire treads on his SUV. So they're stopping to check tires on vehicles. Anyway, they arrested him.
Yeah.
And the reason I got involved, I didn't defend him criminally. I forget who he hired, but one of the victims wanted to hire me to sue him and his family for the assault.
Interesting.
And so I got hired to investigate and potentially prosecute a civil case. And so I was doing criminal defense work at the time. I was just starting to transition to civil work. And so she had hired me. I sent a notice letter, so I was known that I was representing her. And I forget the host of 60 Minutes at the time, Brian, or he had blonde hair.
I don't know either. Yeah.
He was on TV though. He had flown up to Trenton.
Oh. It was Jordan, it was a big, it captivated all of that area, but it was a big thing for Canada. It was international news. It was a big deal, this case.
So this TV host flew to our little town of Trenton because he's investigating, and then he wanted to speak to me because my client wanted to be on the show to be interviewed as one of the victims of Colonel Russell.
No way.
And so it was a very surreal moment when I was in criminal court in a very rundown small town criminal court, and he was waiting in the waiting area with all these criminals waiting to speak to me.
No way.
And so he had offered a full covered flight, hotels to come down to New York so my client could be interviewed. And so anyway, I said no because I didn't think it was a good idea to be involved in a public media about a potentially civil case.
Right.
And so I said, there's no benefit to your civil case, and I don't think you should take advantage of this. So I declined. She ended up firing me because she wanted to go on the show anyway. So I don't know whatever happened. But that was one of the more interesting cases I was involved in.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high profile one.
That is very high profile. Yeah. Like I said, I was in that area at that time, and I still remember the tire tracks. And we were also, you were nervous at that time. It was not a great time to be in that area when they were looking for who the perpetrator was. It was pretty all encompassing. That's a good one, Kris.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the more interesting stories we've ever had on our podcast.
Yeah.
And I'll just say one more case, but I think it's small town because I don't know how many people drive around in ATVs in Toronto.
I definitely don't see them on my sidewalk anywhere.
So one of my most memorable cases, which just recently finished, was an ATV case, a civil case. And it actually went to the Court of Appeal. We'll talk about this if you want. It changed the law on the liability of an owner of a motor vehicle because it applies to an ATV.
Interesting.
So I got retained by a young woman. She was 24 at the time. She was visiting her boyfriend in Picton, Prince Edward County. Yeah. And as is normal to do, they were driving around on their family's ATV regularly on weekends. In the summer one night, they went out to, again, another small town thing. They went out to a pickup truck that they had left at the end of this rural road with self-serve firewood. So people would put money in, they take the firewood. He drove the truck back. She was driving the ATV back at night on a county road. The road takes a 90-degree turn. She drove straight through the turn, hit her head on a tree, suffered a catastrophic brain injury. So she was driving it by herself. So who do we sue?
Yeah.
So we sued the boyfriend for letting her drive the ATV and sued the parents for letting her drive the ATV and the dad as the owner of the ATV.
No way.
Now, the dad wasn't even home at the time.
Was it her dad or the boyfriend's dad?
The boyfriend's dad, who owned the ATV, was the owner of the ATV.
Interesting.
And for 7 years, we litigated the case. Defense insurer, State Farm, was like, there's no liability. She was driving it. She caused the crash. She's an adult. So it's not like it's a child that you're letting drive it. She's a 24-year adult. What duty of care does the boyfriend and the parents owe this adult to stop her from driving the ATV that she voluntarily drove on her own volition? She wanted to drive it.
Yeah.
And so we argued it. We did a trial in 2022, judge alone trial, and the judge found that the boyfriend was liable for letting her drive the ATV.
No way.
But dismissed the claims against the parents.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the Court of Appeal and how you changed the law.
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners.
Yeah, so that's what the interesting part is. We appealed. They appealed first, saying there's no way the boyfriend should have been found liable, and then we cross appealed on the dad as the owner, because it's the statutory law in Ontario, Section 192(2), which makes the owner of a motor vehicle vicariously liable for the negligence of the operator.
Yep.
So think about what we're trying to do is she was operating the vehicle, but we tried to extend the definition operation to the boyfriend letting her drive. So trial judge said, that's no way, that can't extend it. Court of Appeal overturned the trial judge, and there's some discussion on why, but ultimately they found that the owner of the vehicle is responsible for any negligence related to the operation of the vehicle, including the negligent transfer of the vehicle to our client. So
It's crazy.
the boyfriend was negligent in letting her drive, and therefore the dad, who's the owner of the ATV, is vicariously liable for the boyfriend's negligence.
So in lay terms for listeners, what should they be aware of with that decision coming out?
Okay, I told my friends there's two things you should be aware of. One is if you own a vehicle and you're letting someone drive the vehicle, like your son or your daughter or someone else, you better tell them, do not let anyone else drive this vehicle. Because if you let someone else drive the vehicle and they cause a collision and they hurt themselves, as the owner of the vehicle, you could be responsible for the other person letting them drive that vehicle. So that's number one. Do not let your kid loan their vehicles to anybody else that you own. And two is, as a lawyer, don't necessarily turn away those cases, right?
Yeah.
If someone says, I was driving a vehicle and I got in a crash and I'm hurt, and then do some investigation. Well, was the person fit to drive? I mean, that was our argument, because she didn't have a driver's license.
Right.
She didn't have real instruction or experience in operating ATV. All she had done was putt around the farm. And now she's out on a road driving 80 kilometers an hour. So we said there's no way it was safe for her to drive this vehicle. So it was somewhat case specific, but you can see this could happen again. So if you're a lawyer and you get that case, do some research, do some investigation, and there might
call Kris.
He's the ATV expert. We don't get ATVs here, but yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So I'm being cognizant of time because I know that I've got two lawyers on this podcast, and there's always things that are racking up on your to-do list. But Kris, you have to come back. Like, I want to, you're definitely invited back onto our podcast because I think there's a bunch more things we would certainly love to continue to talk about. And you've been such a pleasure to have on.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Definitely. Lots of fun. Very informative too.
100%. Such a great balance. So like I said, we definitely will want to have you back on. And we usually have this big list of questions, and we might leave it for next time. But the one question
a little bit now.
Well, I think the one question we always have to ask, like, because of the name of the podcast is called Butter Torts. So butter tarts, with or without raisins?
Well, probably neither. I don't eat butter tarts.
Oh, like I know the
powerlifter, athlete.
Yeah, sorry. My family would.
I should have said, like, how do you take your granola? Like with,
Probably no raisins.
Right. Probably. Okay. If someone forced you to eat a butter tart,
no raisins.
Okay. It would be no. So
you'd
that's
be using that chin-up bar right after in the office.
Right.
And then we have a bunch of other ones, but I think I'm going to wait. I think I'm going to wait till next time, and we're going to ask you those next time because we definitely want to have you back on. So then that's our commitment that we have to do that for next time. So thank you so much, Kris, for being here. Thanks, George.
Thank you, Kris.
My co-host.
Well, thank you both. I enjoyed it. And anytime, I'm happy to come back.
Great.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this latest episode. We hope to have you join us again, and have a great day.
Bye, everybody.